Welcome, dear friends. Welcome to Cardiac Radio at 11 p.m. Right, just make sure it's online. It looks like it is. Welcome, welcome, dear friends. My name is Shane Martin, and I'm going to be your host with the book Evolution into Worlds. Let me show you who I am. I see some folks here. Welcome, welcome. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. I'm very honored to be here, and I will be your host today. My name is Shane Martin. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I am the founder and president of the Spirit Society of Richmond. And in this lifetime, in my professional life, I'll share a little bit about myself so that you know that I am familiar with the topics and the biological knowledge that is involved in this chapter. So I hold a PhD in neuroscience from VCU here in Richmond. I also have a clinical license as a registered nurse. And I work as a researcher studying healthcare outcomes and quality of healthcare here in Richmond and one of our hospitals. So hopefully today I'll be able to apply some of this biological knowledge to help you, to help all of us, actually I'm always learning, to help all of us to understand a little bit more about this book. So if I go here and show you, to as a reminder, I'll show you the book. We are studying Evolution in Two Worlds by Andrea Luiz. And this book is a wonderful book that was written by two different mediums in two different cities, Chico Xavier and Valdovira, on how you're saying. So I'm monitoring as well. So far we've seen 8 chapters: the cosmic fluid, spiritual body, evolution of the spiritual body, automaticism and the spiritual body, cells and the spiritual body, evolution in sex, evolution in heredity, evolution in metabolism. And today we will be studying evolution in the brain. Welcome, I see some friends here, Les Severo, Sunshine, and Carol. Thank you so much for being here. And I know our friend Dr. Vanessa Salon is also online with us. So today we're going to be talking about evolution in the brain. And this book is a dense book. It's only a few pages long each chapter. However, let me go back to showing you this stuff. Um, it's only a few pages longer, but as Andrea Luiz writes on all his books, it's very dense, it's compact. So I hope to bring to you today, and my plan is to bring you the highlights of all of of this chapter, so that we can together understand a little bit more about the brain and the evolution of the brain throughout time. And as you remember that you were studying with Vanessa so far, we have a we have studied the formation of the spiritual principle, its internships in between the different kingdoms, from the formation of the molecules in the mineral kingdom, the formation of the viruses and bacteria, all the way up to the formation of the first primitive, let's say this way, human beings capable of continuous thought. So throughout all that time, you've studied the formation of cells, how cells work, how the architects of the divine wisdom, God's architects, the superior spirits, built all of the machinery that we have, you and I have today, to be able to enjoy our physical body and our um, internship on this lifetime. So, chapter 9, and I'm just waiting for the PowerPoint to show you the other slide. Hopefully, I'll be able to do that. Chapter 9 is divided into different sections. the formation of the cerebral world, gyrencephaly and lissencephaly, the fixation factor of the factor of fixation, different types of reflexes, the formation of the senses, vision and hearing, and prodigious microcosm. Now, we have an hour to be together now, 55 minutes. So I hope to bring you the highlights of this chapter. If you have any questions, please write them. I'll do my best to answer any questions I can. If I don't, I will go look up the answer for you and we'll work it that way. So how does Andrea Luiz starts this book? So let's think about ourselves as immortal beings who are in this physical realm. And why is it important for us to study this book? This book brings us a deeper appreciation of our multidimensional being, us being the spirit using this physical body, and through the spiritual body or the spiritual body, our spirits act upon our body. So more important than memorizing all the names and understanding them, it's always good as a superior spirit that we will be one day. We want to know those things and study our biology. I would like you to think of yourself as the commander of your body, understanding how it works, bring you the tools to be able to better act within this lifetime for your own evolution and progress, for our consolation and hope. And Andrea Lewis brings to us in the preface of this book that he says, let us study the route of our multimillennial pilgrimage, feeling the heart of the flame of our spirits pulsating everlasting in eternity. So, although the book is really dense in biological knowledge, it was not just made for scientists like myself and Vanessa, but it was made for you and I as multi-millionaire souls living today on this planet. Let me go back to the content. This is how Andrea Lewis starts. I am just checking to make sure you're seeing what I'm saying. So the formation of the cerebral world. There you go. All right. So he starts. In the bosom of time, the divine architects aid the fragmentary consciousness in the building of the brain, the wonderful nest of the mind, in need of a more extensive exteriorization. So, your brain, my brain, is the nest of our minds. And divine architects have helped us from the time we were fragmentary consciousness with experience in the spiritual principle in different kingdoms to build our brains. So look how beautiful this is. You and I are daily commanding the trillions of cells that we have in our body, and throughout time, we are being helped to build the brain that we have today. So it's a picture of how the depiction of how the brain would look like. So being the wonderful nest of the mind, the brain allows us to do what? The brain is a physical organ and is a biased, with a biased opinion, the most beautiful organ in our body, is commanding the rest of the body in terms of its interpreting sensations from the outside, processing them, and it's also allowing you to act upon the physical world in a matter of co-creation with God and living in this planet as a being of God. So here is Andrea Luiz continues to us. The mass of nerve cells, I'm just waiting until the PowerPoint updates. The mass of nerve cells that precedes the formation of the cerebral world is in invertebrates, meaning those without the skeleton that we have. Worms, insects, etc., give rises to invaginations of the ectoderm invertebrates, slowly building the anterior vesicle or forebrain the middle vesicle or midbrain, or the posterior vesicle or hindbrain. Lots of words. Let's break it down. In invertebrates, so if you looked at an insect, their brain, their central nervous system is composed of a mass of cells. Those masses of cells have been built by the Varnagapets, helping us as fragmentary consciousness to build that into the cerebral hemispheres. And when you and I are developing as in embryos, we are massive cells as well. And then massive cells specialize in three different layers. And one of the layers called the ectoderm. The ectoderm gives rise to our nervous system and also to our skin. And here, look in the right, you have a picture of the brain, of a human brain, on our picture, a drawing. And here, all this area in orange is the forebrain. The midbrain is it, the middle of the brain. I'll break it down different structures for you later. And the hindbrain is the more caudal or latter part of the brain. So here is your brain is divided. Once you are a mass of nerve cells, now we move into this beautiful, elaborate organ that has different compartments to it. Okay, so all right, so let me move here, make sure that you're seeing what I'm saying. I apologize, things moving around. So with time, Andrea Luiz brings to us that the brain in fish, and as you can see as the slide updates, the cerebral hemispheres, I mean this outer layer of your brain, are still very small. In amphibians, meaning like the frog, it shows encouraging development. In reptiles, the cerebral hemispheres advances in greater progress, already forming with some perfection the aqueductus silvus. What does that mean? Again, with time, and he doesn't say how long, but for millions of years, we've developed from being a single cell to multicellular, to having tissues, to having organs, to being an internship in different kingdoms. And from one type of animal to another, with time, the brain has evolved, the cerebral hemispheres have evolved. And he brings the attention to the aqueductus sylvius or the cerebral aqueduct. So look here first in this picture where you have the brain inside your skull. And there are, this is your cerebral hemisphere forebrain. Here's the midbrain and the hindbrain. And you also have what we call the ventricles in the brain. And those are the areas that have inside themselves the cerebral spinal fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid is produced here by the membranes that develop the brain, and the aqueduct of Sylvius is literally a tube that connects the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. And the spinal fluid flows from your brain down into the ventricles and lubricates everything and contains certain substances. And it goes down to the third ventricle, to the fourth, and down your central canal, and it is um, absorbed by your brain. You're constantly doing that. That is already happening in reptiles, meaning lizards, for example. And he brings us a very interesting aspect here. At this stage, the reptile stage, the coronary center or the crown chakra of the future psychosoma or spiritual body, reflected in the pineal gland, starts to develop more concretely in its spiritual form, and it's reasonably forming lacertids. This is a type of a lizard that lives in New Zealand. And in this lizard, the pineal gland extends in its embryonic stages to this area of the brain that we call parietal region, and then assuming the eye, the future of an eye with characteristics implements. So let us go back to me so I can do a little bit of explaining. So we have talked about a lot of different things so far. So from being a mass of cells, recapitulating, to going through developing cerebral hemispheres, and from animal, from fish to amphibians to reptiles, the cerebral hemispheres develop. And then Andrea Luiz brings to us that the pineal gland is already present in reptiles in a developed form. And why is that important? The pineal gland is in the middle of the brain, deep down, deep inside of your brain. If you think about it, it will be behind your eye and the level of your ear here. And he's going to explain to us what does the pineal gland does. So imagine yourself as a full, imagine it seeing inside of your brain and these beautiful yet small structures in there. And what is it for? Why do you want to know that you have a brain that gets bigger? A brain that gets bigger allows you to also have more cells, have more connections, more potential for those cells to interact, and more computational capabilities, meaning the ability to take in input, process it, and make an action. So let's look now at how the pineal gland, how Andrea Luiz showed us what does the pineal gland do, which is a complement to what he says in Missionaries of the Light. Now I'm going to wait until it updates. I hope that you are still seeing me as I look down to my phone so that I can see if I'm still connected. So he continues. Reputable zoologists, who are the zoologists? Those are the scientists who study animals. Regard the pineal gland as an ocular globe that discarded by nature. So like a third eye that wasn't developed and stays in its shrunken form. However, for us in Spiritism, the pineal gland is where, no, sorry, that is where in the reptiles, the pineal gland begins to consolidate itself as what? What is the pineal gland? The energetic fulcrum of subtle sensations for the translation and selection of diverse mental states and the mechanisms of reflection and thought, meditation and discernment. I'll read it to you and then I'll go back to talk to you a little bit about this. It foreshadows the process of conscious or unconscious mediumship, through which, what do we do when we have mediumship? Discarnate and incarnate spirits communicates with one another in the same range of vibrations. Either for what? What is the purpose? We can be in the same range of vibration for greater creations of science and religion, culture and art, in the upward journey towards God, or we can be in the range of vibrations that are of the lower level, in which the souls imprisoned in a trial or in shadows portray themselves with reciprocity. Okay, take a little water if you have some, and let's talk a little bit about it together. Okay, so soon you're gonna see me. So what is Underluis telling us? Why am I going through the process of development of the brain and the brain growing more cells and this very specific structure that Andrea Luiz brings to us is the pineal gland. And it talks about how this structure allows us to connect through mediumship with the discarnate and incarnate spirits. So inside your brain, there's a physical structure that allows you to have the connection. And why is that important? The beauty of your brain and all of the other cells and tissues of your body is for you, for us, not you, but us, talking to myself as well, to appreciate the marvelous form of the human body that allows us to be here, to evolve, to experience, to help one another. So the pineal gland, in the book Missionaries of the Light that I have here, Andrea Luiz, there's this whole chapter, chapter 2, where he also talks about the pineal gland. And he's observing some mediums, and he brings to us, his mentor brings to us the pineal gland as the gland of mental life, as an organ of the ethereal body's highest expression. It presides over the neural phenomena of emotions. It unravels the divine links of nature that connect existences in a series of struggles for perfecting the soul. So, knowing about these, Let's bring it back to our daily lives. Allow us to understand that we have our spirit, our spiritual body, and our physical body, and we have mechanisms of communicating either to move forward towards God or to stay lower, stagnated in connectivity. And why is that important? Because it depends on how you and I are feeling, our mental states. It depends on what you and I are thinking, feeling in a daily basis. So allows us to understand we have that ability to think positive thoughts, improve and replace our negative thoughts by good thoughts, to mold the good, feel the good, visualize the good as Emmanuel brings to us, for us to connect with whom? With our guardian angels, with the divine architects that are allowing us to be on this body, with the trillions of cells that are under our command. Okay? All right, so let's move forward a little bit with. So the next chapter, now we talked about the pineal gland. The next chapter of the next part of this chapter is about gyrencephaly and lysencephaly. Apologize, I didn't move. And what is that? The gyrencephaly and lysencephaly, don't be scared about all the big names. Gyrencephaly just means you have folds, gyri in your brain. Lysencephaly just means your brain is smooth. Okay? So he continues. The growth of the cerebral hemispheres, remember, from invertebrates to fish to amphibious reptiles. Now he's on the birds. Proceeds with in birds with significant cerebellar portions. The cerebellum, as you're going to see, is important for fine motor control and balance. You know, birds fly, so it might be important for them to have balance. In mammals, we then find the encephalon or your brain, with considerable features representing circumvolutions in the gyrencephalon and significant increase in the cortex. Let me show you a picture of what he means. Here are some examples of some brains of different animals. Okay, and here is, I'll show, wait until it uploads. I see some new friends are showing here too. And we have the different brains here. So here's the capybara's brain, which is a rodent, but it has the gyri or the folds. Here are different brains of monkeys. Don't worry about the numbers; these are just weights and number of neurons, estimated number of neurons. And here's our human brain. Here's the cerebral hemisphere, the cerebral cortex is talking about. And each and every one of these valleys here, the peaks and valleys, are the folds of the gyri or gyruses, which brings the name gyrencephaly. Here, I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think you can, with a little delay. You have here the cerebellum, which is an area of the brain for motor control and balance. That's all it means. Throughout time, the brains grew. We had more neurons. Then, in order to occupy the same space with more area, the brain just folded in and of itself. Otherwise, you and I would have a huge brain if our brain were to be smooth like a brain of a rat or a mouse, for example. All right, I hope we're all doing okay. We'll move forward to talk about um, physically what happens. He says, the more the scale of evolution, I'll wait until it loads for you. I'm sorry, friends. Thank you for hanging out with me and the technology. The more the scale of evolution verticalizes itself, meaning the more um, complex the animals get and their brain gets, the more it reduces the percentage of volume of the cerebellum. Remember that area of the brain involved with the motor control, while the cerebral hemispheres dilate themselves. So if they dilate themselves, they get bigger. If they get bigger, they need to fold. Otherwise, there's no space within the skull. The skull is bone. So you can't just grow your skull forever. So we keep the proportions within the brain. And he talks about, however, it should not be noted that this phenomenon of progression is fundamentally not related to intelligence, and it is not, strictly speaking, proportional to the number of cerebral circumvolutions, meaning the number of foldings of gyri. So much so that mammals like rabbits, kangaroos, platypus, and even some primates have a brain without circumvolutions or is encephalic. For example, if you Google it later, stay with me tonight, marmosets, and I can show you a picture if we have time in the end. Marmosets are primates, but they have smooth brains. Okay, also, for example, elephants have a brain that is 3 times the size of ours, but has less neurons than we have in different areas. They're very smart animals, but they do not have the human capability that we have. So now I'm going to move my my text here to show you the picture behind it. I'm waiting. Okay, there we go. So here's the brain of a rat. It's a drawing, right? It's smooth. Compare that now with the cat's brain, the chimpanzee brains, and dolphin's brain, and our human brain over here depicted. So here's the cerebral hemispheres in lighter color, and the cerebellum in darker color here for those you can see red is reddish, and you can see the size of the cerebellum change and the proportions between the amount of cerebral hemisphere and the cerebellum change when we get from the red to the human to the dolphin, for example. You can see it's beautifully folded and allows us to have a lot of different neurons. Okay, well, how does that happen? So how is it that and where does it happen, right? So we are seeing different brains, different animals, different places of internship where we have been. And Andrea Luiz continues by telling us how that's happened. So he says, like young children attending kindergarten for rudimentary learning, discarnated higher order animals, let's say primates, for example, out of the nuclei of physical psychic evolution, in which they are grouped by symbiosis. So they are discarnated, meaning they are in the spiritual realm, and they are grouped because they are alike, they are symbiosis, they are helping one another in a symbiotic relationship. What do? Like children, they receive the intervention of celestial instructors in special regions to exercise the nervous centers. Now, I'm going to move back so we can talk a little bit about this. So, look at the beauty of what we're studying. We saw the cells, we saw the progression of the spiritual principle in the previous lectures, wonderfully taught by Vanessa. And we saw back over and over again that Andrea Luiz brings to us that none of that was done alone. So there are always divine architects, there's always higher spirits that are with us since we were created until now and for eternity. They're here with us today. And they're helping that situation happen. When he describes the evolution of the brain, throughout time and by eons, meaning millions of years. He's talking about like children, they take those higher order animals, the celestial instructors go and work with them so they can work on their brains in the spiritual realm. That's why the book is called Evolution into Worlds. Spoiler alert, you and I, on all the animals, even the bacteria, every single life form on Earth and around the universe, because this is probably a law, we are evolving. Here, you and I are incarnate beings. On a daily basis, we are evolving. The bacteria inside your gut is evolving. The bacteria in your skin is evolving. The viruses around us are evolving, but they're not evolving alone. So let's think about how we can apply this in our daily lives. So when you and I are feeling the vicissitudes of life, the happiness of life, we can always be certain and rest assured that we're together with those divine archetypes. So using the structure of our spiritual and physical brain with the pineal brain, and knowing all of this helps you to do what? To improve your mental vibration, connect with those architects, and help in the progression of the universe by co-creating with God. Hopefully, I made some sense. And then we are talking about applying and appreciating our lives, our physical bodies, and the ability to be here today, you and I. And that also our discarnate friends are in the spiritual world with us. They are also evolving. So let's keep going and talk now about what is the brain made of? The brain is made of a lot of different things, including neurons. Okay, so let me go back to the neurons and I introduce to you my own neuron. I'm just joking. It's not from my brain, but it is a neuron which I've studied before. And a neuron that I've proudly stained. And he's going to talk about something called the fixation factor, and depending on um, who the translation is factor of fixation. This chapter is I translated it myself, and I used also Vanessa's translation in collaboration. So, what does Andrea Luiz says? The neurons in the brain is made of neurons, are born and renew themselves millions of times in the physical and non-physical or extra physical planes, structuring the experimental brains with more vibrant and vaster ingredients of the spiritual body when functioning in the physical tissues until they stand up in the definite morphological units of the nervous system. So let's focus on they are born and renew themselves millions of times in both realms of life. Okay, so let's go back to a topic that Vanessa, a theme of this book: patience, time, effort, repetition. So you and I need to learn to be calmer, more patient, to recognize our opportunities for improvement and repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay? So this is a picture of a real neuron. And I'm gonna move my cursor here so you can see and I can show you what I'm gonna complete in the next slide with this schematic, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background, and I'm gonna wait until I can see that. And you're very welcome, Rudy. I can see all the hearts and some new folks, and Alice and Les Vero and Valeria Benfica. Thank you so much for being with me. So here's a neuron. This larger part down here is the cell body of the neuron, and I'll explain to you a little bit more about it later. Then you have this tree here, then in green. So this neuron is stained with a protein that glows green under the microscope. So this slice of a brain. And then down, those are the dendrites of the cell. They receive information from other cells, pass it down to the cell body of the neuron here, and then all these arrows are pointing out to axons or the nerves. So those are extensions of those cells. So those are axons of that neuron. So that neuron is branching out. Think about like electrical wires that are branching out to communicate with other neurons. Okay? There's four. And so he brings to us The neurons have a very specialized morphology, meaning an anatomy or a structure, which I just showed to you, as it reproduces more deeply in the texture of the psychosomatic cells. Here it is. Here's a schematic what we just saw. The neuron happens to be in the hippocampus, an area involved in memory. But if I were to draw that cell, you would see a cell body here with a nucleus. Remember, you guys once studied um, the reproductive um, chapter, which I am sorry, I'm going to have to look it up, which was that chapter. It was evolution and sex and evolution and heredity. The nucleus is where the chromosomes are. That's where the DNA lives. And then you have the dendrites. Those are the structures that receive information. And then the axon. And here you're depicting a fatty substance around the axons that insulates them. And the axons transmit electrical signals from the cell body to another cell body here. And you have the terminals. And this is what Andrea Luiz brings to us. The neuron is a whole microscopic power plant, constituting itself of a cellular body with extensions, whereas its nucleus represents a sparse chromatin and a nucleolus. Okay, so don't be scared about the names. A sparse chromatin means the chromatin or the DNA molecules are unbundled. Let me go back so you can see me as I explain this. There's a little delay, so what does that mean, sparse chromatin? It just means the cell is very active. So in order for the cells to do everything that you've seen so far, to breathe, to cellular respiration for the mitochondria, to replicate, to create the chemical reactions, the cell produces proteins. The proteins are produced from the DNA molecule. So you've got DNA, RNA, proteins, like you saw in high school biology way back when, right? And being a scarce, it just means it's not condensed, sparse. It's just highly visible because the chromosomes of the DNA condenses to form chromosomes for cell division. So most of the time, the DNA is unbundled or unraveled for you to be able to read it and pass it along to proteins. Okay, so I'm going to go back to what he talks about. So there's something very important inside each and every neuron that I would like to discuss with you a little bit. So he says the nucleus finds itself surrounded of protoplasm, cytoplasm, and you have the mitochondria, which is a structure for cellular respiration and energy. Then you have neurofibrils, which is part of this cytoskeleton. The Golgi is another structure helping making glycomolecules. Abundant melanin and an ochre pigment, which is closely related to the spiritual body and has a very important role in the life of thought. Okay, so inside each and every neuron, you have a very important pigment that is important, of course, in the life of thought. Increases in maturity, increases considerably in maturity, meaning when we get old. We also find a substance invisible in the active cell, which spreads itself in the cytoplasm and dendrites, easily recognizable by dyes, when the cell body is properly fixated, meaning when we take the cells and we prepare them and we fix them, meaning we prevent them from deteriorating, and we stain them with dyes. The substance expresses itself in what we call Nissl corpuscles, so Nissl bodies, which can suffer chromatolysis. So the Nissl bodies is named after a German scientist who was named Nissl, and he created the staining. So we named that after him. And chromatology just means it can break down with time. What happens when the cells die, if there is an injury to the cells. So the mentioned substance, focus on this part now, represents what? The psychic nourishment drawn by the spiritual body in the laboratory of cosmic life through breathing, doing physical rest for the restoration of tired and irreplaceable cells. Holy moly. So let's go back. Psychic nourishment. So the Niso bodies are nourishment for each and every cell, psychically, from our spirit to the spiritual body to our physical body. And then it's drawn from breathing during physical rest. So when you and I sleep, we're drawing this nourishment through these little tiny particles inside in each and every cell. So during physical rest, those cells are tired, so they get restored and are replaced. Let me show you what the Niso bodies look like in the microscope. Let's see what's coming. I see no friends showing up. Hi, Donna for duty. There you go. So here's a picture of a cell stained. Here's the nucleus, and here's the nucleolus, N for nucleus, and U for nucleolus. And the Nissl bodies are these darker areas here in the cytoplasm. Okay, here are the dendrites, they're thicker dendrites. We don't see an axon here, we see other cells. Okay, so this is what it would look like in real life. So let's focus on the psychic nourishment for a moment. Go back here. Neuroscience knows that the Nissl bodies exist. Okay, because as you saw, there's a picture of it, right? We described it, we stained it. However, we don't know that they are psychic nourishment for the cells. Why not? Because we know that structurally, those bodies are composed of a structure we call endoplasmatic reticulum. What is that? It's a series of vesicles that have proteins attached to them, and have ribosomes attached to them. They look rough under the microscope. And what do? They produce proteins. So the machinery inside the cell that is made was created over time to produce the proteins that come from the information we have on our DNA are this represent the psychic nourishment drawn by the spiritual body in the laboratory of cosmic life. So this is something that science still, physical science doesn't know. So each inside in each and every physical cell, there's a structure that is responsible for psychic nourishment. Isn't that beautiful? Very, very beautiful, especially if you think about over time with age and certain diseases, we have that the psychic that structures degrade and break down. So he continues. I'm going to hold you more than I have time to. So what does he say about this ochre pigment? He says back then in 1958, human science observes without further definition. Now I told you, we know those are the endoplasmatic reticulum. Is known in the spiritual world as the factor of fixation or fixation factor. What is it doing? Is as if enclosing the mind within itself. And encloses the mind, meaning brings the mind in when the mind distances itself from renewed movement in which life is expressed and advances, becoming denser or scarcer in human spheres, according to the in accordance with the mental attitude of the spirit during the duration of its corporeal existence. So our minds can be more attached or less attached using this fixation factor. So this fixation factor can close our minds within the physical. So let's think about if we are distancing ourselves from renewal and progress, we become more denser. But if you're moving forward towards accepting the challenges and growing, then we become scarcer. So we're less attached, less fixated in the physical body. All right, so let's us all take a deep breath and appreciate the beauty. You're going to see briefly my screen. So, the last part that I'm going to bring to you tonight is the formation of the senses. But I'm going to wait until it uploads. There's a little delay. I apologize. So, the formation of the senses. Under the guidance of the sublime intelligences, each sense is set up in a special organization made up of various apparatuses and implements. Let me translate before you look at the rest. I'll read everything, we'll break it down. The integral brain also organizes itself into diverse lobes with vast resources for the future. So we're talking about um, in the animals kingdom. So it has the reserves there. When the soul, then newly created, instinctive in the construction of its own vehicle, will be erected in an awakened consciousness capable of utilizing the potential advances put forth by divine wisdom. Let us breathe and talk about it together. So, under the again, the guidance of sublime intelligences. So, none of this is by chance or haphazardous. We are being guided, even today, as we evolve as humans. Who knows how we're going to look like in a million years? Hopefully, our brains are going to look different because we're going to evolve, we're going to co create, we're going to get better, we're going to improve, be kinder, nicer to one another. So each sense is set up in a special organization, meaning the sense touch. He talks about how touch was, and I'm pointing out to my own hand, and you're not seeing what I'm seeing, of course. Um, this the sense of touch, for example, all over your. Let me see if I can share this as okay. So cool. I might be able to do this as I've read it. So as the sense of touch, for example, all over our skins and the skin of animals, then we have specialized structures that sense the environment. We also have um, smell, we have hearing, we have sight. For smell, we have um, the animals and us, we have special receptors in our noses that detect the chemical substances, and that stimuli from the touch moves through nerves to your brain, is processed, and you have a reaction active to your spinal cord at that point. Then you can feel cold, you can feel hot, etc. The smell is detecting the different substances around us, right? To protect us from the environment. If there is a bad substance we want to get away from, the sense of vision, the sense of hearing, okay? And then there are specialized apparatuses like your eyes, that your retina that collects the photons of light and transduces into electrical signals that go all the way to the back of your brain. And you have hearing, where your ear is capturing the wave sounds, transducing into electrical activity and sending it to your brain. And you are also you have areas in your brain that I'm going to show you next that are responsible for processing it all. So let's go back to the slide so you can see it. So look at this beautiful colored picture here. We have the different lobes of the brain, like he says. The integral brain organizes itself in diverse lobes with vast resources for the future. Since when we started talking about the fishes with the cerebral cortexes, and then the amphibians, and then the reptilians, and then the mammals, those lobes have resources for when the soul is created. So when we go from spiritual principle to a spirit, then those resources are there for us to utilize it as we go through the kingdoms. So the frontal lobe here, as you see in red, has an area for speech, an area for smell, the olfactory area, an area for motor control, an area for touch and pressure, meaning you're sensing different things from your body here in this area, for example, an area for taste, an area for hearing, an area for facial recognition. So the frontal lobe is the red. This lobe here in green is the parietal lobe. and it has hearing and facial recognition. For example, it has much more. It's just a simplified version. Sorry, this is the temporal lobe. I apologize. And the parietal lobe is the one in yellow. And you have a sense of boy awareness. You have a big area for language and reading, information of speech. This is the left side of the brain as you're looking towards your left. And here in the back, in the occipital lobe, you have vision and the processing of visual information. Okay, so look at the beauty of the brain and all the things that have had to happen during millions of times where we are gonna like I said, we are building this brain with the help of the spirits. So the last part, two more, and we'll take a deep breath, and hopefully it'll be time to end with a nice prayer to connect with those divine intelligences. So he talks about the prodigious microcosms. So he talks about in this chapter the highlights are these, but there's more about the formation of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and already in the viscera because I showed you the senses, the receiving of information, and the areas of the brain of processing, so that you and I can respond to the stimuli in the environment. And then he talks about special nerves, and he talk about autonomic nervous system works, I guess work as transmitting and receiving stations, manipulating the mental energy that is projected or collected by the mind in constant action in the domains of sensation and idea, in connections and pathways that the science of man hardly begins to perceive, acting in the other centers of the spiritual body and in the physiological zones that configure them in the somatic vehicle through reflex circuits. So let's focus on the part that we manipulate the mental energy that we project out or collect. So in each and every time we have our different mental states, our thoughts, our feelings, we're projecting it out to the universe, right? And most importantly, let me see if you can see me and the PowerPoint at the same time. You're collecting. So if you're collecting and you're projecting, we need to be careful about where we're projecting and where we're collecting. So now, in understanding this physical structure and apparatus, that of course is built from where? Through the command of the spirit, the spiritual body, and then the body, because everything goes from the spirit to the physical body, I shall say. Allow us to be mindful and bring it back our agency, meaning I am able of changing my meaning, the way I think, the way I feel, and I'm going to do another free advertisement for Louise. Hey, this is the book. You can hear your life. So if you can think about improving each and every thought pattern that you have, depending on which conditions you have, now you have the power of co-creating, projecting good feelings and thoughts, receiving good feelings and thoughts, and connecting through, remember, conscious or unconscious mediumship with those high level spirits that are helping us, the divine architects, the celestial instructors. Look how beautiful it is. You and I have the power to do that. So today, we're invited to think about how to apply this. Knowing all of these is important, but it's more important that I feel as a being that allows myself to feel loved, to feel cared for, that I have the command of myself, that I can take good care of myself, and then use this beautiful physical instrument in both realms now that we are incarnated. But then when we were discarnated, we'll be discarnated one day, then we can use that to improve and progress and co-create with God. Okay? So last slide is this beautiful one. So he talks about the diencephalon. Okay, so let's focus on it's the part of the brain, the midbrain, in the inside of your brain, not outside, but in the middle of the brain, where the pineal gland would be. An essentially sensory and vegetative field would be actually below the pineal gland because we'll be talking about automated things that we do like breathing and heart rate will be in that area. The part of the most primitive of the central nervous system, the crown center, as the luminous, meaning light, fulcrum, meaning base, luminous base, interconnecting with the cerebral center, vital center, the crown center, which is we already saw that corresponds to the pineal gland. The cerebral center is expressed in the cortex, so that's why he spent so much time talking about this your cerebral cortex and its junctions of forces. So this crown center is commanding the other vital centers, but is also joining forces with them. So the spirit, the millennial spirit, finds in the brain the cabinet of command of the energies that serve us. So your spirit is commanding all the energies that it has, and those energies are stored in the brain as an apparatus of expression of his or her feelings and thoughts. So the feelings and thoughts comes from your spirit, and then the brain is the apparatus where you can express them. So in the regimen of responsibility and self-choice, he or she will shape in space and time our own path of ascension to God. Okay, so let's go back here. Break it down. Okay, friends, this is the last part that I had for you today, and I hope that I've been able to explain to you the evolution of the brain throughout the different animals in the animal kingdom, and the importance of certain structures in the brain, like the pineal gland, its relationship with the physical and the spiritual and body, and also how we can use this knowledge of the structure of the brain, where things are stored in the brain, the architecture of the brain for our own improvement. And especially when we talk about, the brain being the nest of the mind, the area where the mind stays. For us to be mindful of the importance of having that energetic exchange with the higher realms into ascension to God and not remain in the lower vibration. So if we find ourselves in the lower vibration, to make that effort and that repetition of substituting the negative with the positive thoughts and feelings. And also in the action of helping others that helps you also gain that sense of feeling connected with the higher realms, knowing that you and I evolve each and every day with the help of this beautiful divine architect. And one day, you and I will be one of them. We're destined to progress, we're destined to be a pure spirit. So, knowing this today will help us one day help another spirit in progress and evolution to um, achieve that state of pure spirit. So I hope that you have a wonderful night. And I see here, I'm going to look down into my phone real quickly. And I see you guys are so kind. Thank you, Daisy, so much. Thank you, Vanessa Schultz, for being here. I really appreciate your patience and everything and being in this beautiful 11 p.m. community together, allowing us to build our knowledge, get those tools for improvement in everyday lives. So, if you allow me, I have a few minutes left. I'm looking at the clock here and making sure you can see what I see and there's no glitch on the system. Allow me to use a few minutes of your time for thank you, sunshine, for the hearts and minds and the kindness of you all. So I want you to, as we pray, put your hand here in your chest and another one in your belly. We're going to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, we created it throughout millennia. Let's use it. So I want you to take a deep breath, counting to four, and you're going to feel first your chest rise. And then I want you to feel your belly rising. I want you to give me that deep Very deep breath, think yoga breath. So counts to four. One, two, three, four. Release at count of four. Four, three, two, one. So what are we doing? We're connecting a little bit, going back to our bodies, allowing us to use our hormones for a state of relaxation when you're feeling um, like you're feeling anxious. Try to do the deep breathing to bring you centered again. So tonight, we're deeply thankful for the opportunity, dear Lord, to be together today, for the work and dedication of our mediums, Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira, for accepting the challenge of bringing these beautiful books to fruition in the physical realm. We are thankful for the knowledge and for the help that we receive in a daily basis. May our spirit guides be with us each and every hour of our days, guiding, allowing us a deeper connection with the higher realms. May each and every person in both realms of life in this planet feel embraced by a shower of healing light. May all those who suffer feel faithful and strong in their feelings, thoughts, and vibration. Let us all collectively improve the energetic vibrations of the planet, moving us closer to a world of regeneration. May you guys be blessed throughout the night if you're going to sleep, or throughout the day if you're continuing with your day. We ask you, Lord, for your permission to end tonight's broadcasting. And so be it. Thank you, friends, for being with me tonight. I hope that you have a lovely day or a lovely evening here for us in the United States. And I hope to see you soon. Very honored and humbled to be here today. I thank you for your time and for the opportunity. Have a good night, friends. Bye.